Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The stench of recycled air and unwashed bodies hung heavy in the dilapidated orbital station. Rust-colored stains marked the walls where moisture had seeped through ancient metal, creating patterns like dried blood. Station Omega-9 had once been a legitimate trading post along the outer rim, but those days were long gone. Now it housed the dregs of society, smugglers, fugitives, and those who trafficked in the galaxy's most forbidden commodity, sentient life. Derek moved through the crowd with practiced indifference, his weathered leather jacket bearing the scars of countless close calls. A thin scar traced from his left eye to the corner of his mouth, twitching slightly as he surveyed the merchandise on display. He wasn't here to make friends, just another transaction, another day surviving in a universe that had forgotten mercy. "Ah, my discerning friend returns," purred the auctioneer, a reptilian humanoid whose scales glinted dully beneath the flickering lights. "Looking for something special today? Perhaps a new mechanic for that wreck you call a ship?" Derek offered a mirthless smile. "Just browsing." "Curious what trash you're peddling this time." The auctioneer's forked tongue flicked out in amusement. "Oh, we have some exceptional specimens today, including ... He gestured toward a shadowed corner where several cages stood. A very unusual acquisition. Derek's curiosity betrayed him. He followed the auctioneer's gaze to a reinforced cage set apart from the others. Inside sat a motionless figure, female in form but unmistakably alien. Her skin was a deep azure blue, marked with intricate patterns that might have been tattoos or natural markings. She wore ancient armor, cracked and tarnished with age but still impressive in its craftsmanship. Heavy chains bound her wrists and ankles, yet she made no effort to test them. Her head remained bowed, long white hair cascading over her face like a burial shroud. "What's this supposed to be?" Derek asked, approaching the cage with calculated nonchalance. The auctioneer's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "A warrior from the outer systems. Some say her kind were the most feared soldiers in the galaxy before their civilization collapsed. We found her adrift in a derelict vessel. Hasn't spoken a word or opened her eyes since capture. But the armor alone is worth the asking price." A small crowd had gathered, murmuring with a mixture of fascination and mockery. Derek felt their eyes on him, waiting for his reaction. He'd built his reputation on being unimpressed by anything the universe threw at him. "Looks like a dried-up mummy in armor," he called out loudly, eliciting appreciative laughter from the onlookers. "Maybe you should donate it to a museum instead." The laughter swelled, and Derek basked in it momentarily. He leaned closer to the bars, studying the strange blue-skinned woman. She hadn't moved a muscle despite the noise and attention. "Probably dead already," he added, reaching toward the cage to tap on one of the bars. "Waste of a perfectly good..." The movement came so fast his brain barely registered it. A blue hand shot out through the bars, fingers clamping around his throat with crushing force. Derek's words died in a strangled gasp as he found himself yanked forward, his face pressed against the cold metal of the cage. The woman's head remained bowed, her eyes still firmly shut. Yet her grip was unyielding, precise, the hold of a predator who knew exactly where its prey stood. Chaos erupted. The crowd scattered backward. Security personnel materialized with weapons drawn. Derek clawed frantically at the hand crushing his windpipe, his lungs burning for air. The blue woman's face remained impassive, eyes closed, yet somehow he felt her attention focused entirely on him, like a blade against his throat. "Release him now!" The auctioneer shrieked, signaling to the guards. "Terminate the asset." Through darkening vision, Derek watched a guard raise a pulse rifle. Something, instinct perhaps, or madness, made him throw up his hand in protest. "Wait," he wheezed, the word barely audible through his constricted throat. "Don't shoot." To his surprise, the blue woman's grip loosened fractionally, allowing him just enough air to speak. He sagged against the cage, gasping. "I'll take her," he croaked. The auctioneer blinked his vertical eyelids in rapid succession. "You'll what?" "I said I'll buy her." Derek massaged his throat, feeling the bruises already forming. The blue woman had withdrawn her hand back into the cage as swiftly as she had extended it, resuming her statue-like pose as if nothing had happened. "Are you insane?" the auctioneer hissed. "This one is clearly defective. Dangerous. We should dispose of it before it harms a valued customer. Derek straightened, forcing a confidence he didn't feel into his voice. If she's this dangerous asleep, I'd rather have her with me than against me. He paused, then added with a forced smile. Besides, I've always had a soft spot for dangerous women. His quip did nothing to lighten the tension. The auctioneer's tail twitched nervously. Your credits, your problem, he finally said. But we take no responsibility for what happens after purchase. All sales final. Aren't they always? Derek replied, thumbing his credit chip. An hour later, after haggling and processing the transaction, Derek stood in the loading bay watching as a mechanized loader carefully maneuvered the heavy cage onto his ship, the Scavenger's Dream. The blue woman remained motionless throughout the transfer, showing no interest in her change of ownership. PX-4, his maintenance droid, observed the proceedings with as much apprehension as a droid could express. Its optical sensors whirred as it processed the scene. Sir, may I inquire as to the purpose of acquiring this individual? PX-4's synthesized voice carried a note of concern. My risk assessment protocols suggest this purchase exceeds acceptable danger parameters by approximately 87.3%. Derek touched his bruised throat gingerly. Noted, PX. Let's just say I'm curious. I want to see if the mummy wakes up. Morbid curiosity is rarely a sound basis for financial investment, the droid commented. That's why you're the maintenance droid and I'm the captain, Derek replied, signaling for the bay doors to close once the cage was secured in the cargo hold. Set course for the Kali sector. We've got a delivery to make there anyway. As the Scavenger's Dream broke orbit from the decrepit station, Derek found himself standing in the cargo hold, staring at the cage and its motionless occupant. He'd had the foresight to reinforce the cage's locking mechanism, though something told him such precautions were likely futile if she truly wanted to escape. So, he said to the silent figure, I guess we're roommates now? I'm Derek. Most people call me Derek the Fox, on account of my survival instincts, though buying you might have just proved that nickname undeserved. No response, not even a twitch. I don't suppose you have a name? Or at least a reason why you nearly crushed my windpipe back there. He waited, then shrugged. Fair enough. The silent treatment it is. He set down a container of nutrient paste and water within reach of the cage. Dinner is served. Not 5-star, but it'll keep you alive. Assuming you actually eat. The blue woman remained perfectly still, her chest rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. Her face, what little he could see of it beneath the curtain of white hair, betrayed no emotion. Right. Well, make yourself at home. Derek turned to leave, then paused at the door. And just so we're clear, my ship, my rules. Try to kill me again, and I'll jettison you into the nearest star. No hard feelings. He didn't expect a response, and he didn't get one. Over the next several days, a strange routine developed aboard the Scavenger's Dream. Derek would bring food to the cargo hold twice daily, set it down within reach of the cage, and leave. The blue woman remained statue-like, her head bowed, eyes closed. Yet he found himself talking to her regardless. On the third day, Derek returned to the cargo hold to find something odd. The food container sat precisely where he'd left it, but it was empty. Not a crumb remained. He circled the cage slowly, examining the lock still secure, the floor spotless, the woman unchanged. Didn't want me to know you eat, huh? He said, a hint of triumph in his voice. Your secret's safe with me. The blue woman gave no indication she'd heard him, but somehow the quality of her silence seemed different, more deliberate than vacant. On the 5th day, he brought a bottle of Arcturian whiskey and 2 glasses to the cargo hold. Anniversary today, he explained, pouring a measure into each glass and sliding one toward the cage. 7 years since the Cartesian job. Greatest heist of my career, and my biggest regret. He downed his whiskey in one swallow, feeling it burn all the way to his stomach. Had a partner then. Lena, brilliant woman. Could hack any system ever built like it was child's play? He stared into his empty glass. We had it all planned perfectly. Get in, access the vault, get out, no casualties. Derek poured himself another drink. But there was a security protocol we missed. Silent alarm. By the time we reached the extraction point, they were waiting for us. He closed his eyes briefly. I got away. Lena didn't. He looked up at the blue woman whose stillness now seemed almost respectful in the dim light of the cargo hold. Sometimes I think I hear her in my comms, telling me to hurry, that she's still waiting at the extraction point. He raised his glass in a mock toast. To the ghosts we leave behind. The whiskey in the other glass remained untouched, but when Derek returned the next morning, the glass was empty. By the 7th day, the blue woman had become a silent confidant, a presence that somehow made the vast emptiness of space feel less absolute. If you're planning to kill me, he told her as he checked the ship's systems one morning, at least wait until I finish my coffee. Death before caffeine is just uncivilized. He was running diagnostics when the proximity alerts screamed to life. PX4's voice came urgently through the intercom. Sir, 2 vessels approaching at attack velocity. They're not responding to identification requests. Derek swore, abandoning his coffee as he raced to the bridge. The scanner showed 2 sleek Hunter-class ships closing fast, their weapon systems hot. Evasive maneuvers, divert power to the shields. He slid into the pilot's seat, hands flying across the controls. The first blast struck before the shields fully engaged, rocking the ship violently. Warning lights flashed across the console. Sir, they've targeted our propulsion systems, PX4 reported. Engine efficiency down to 62%. Derek gritted his teeth, throwing the ship into a spiraling dive to evade the second volley. Who the hell are these guys? Pirates wouldn't waste time with disabling shots. The comm system crackled to life, and a cold voice filled the bridge. Attention, Scavenger's Dream. This is Captain Millar of the Reclamation Corps. You are in possession of stolen property of extreme value. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. Derek hit the mute button. Reclamation Corps? Never heard of them. He turned to PX4. Check the database. Find out who these people are. The droid's processor's word. Limited information available. The Reclamation Corps appears to be a private military organization specializing in artifact retrieval and acquisition of rare specimens. Another blast rocked the ship. The navigation console sparked and went dark. They're hurting us, Derek realized, trying to force us down to that moon. He nodded toward the barren, desert-like satellite visible through the view screen. Sir, engine efficiency now at 41%. Structural integrity compromised in sections 3 through 7. We cannot sustain this pursuit. Derek swore again, more creatively this time. Fine. We'll play along. He opened the comm channel. Reclamation Corps, this is the Scavenger's Dream. Our systems are damaged. We're setting down on the moon. But I want to negotiate. No response came, but the attacking vessels eased their assault, taking up escort positions as Derek guided his wounded ship toward the dusty surface of the moon. The landing was rough, sending tremors through the ship's frame as it settled on the barren landscape. Through the viewports, Derek could see the 2 Hunter ships circling overhead like predatory birds. They're scanning us, PX4 reported, and deploying ground forces. Estimate 12 armed individuals approaching. Time to make ourselves scarce, Derek muttered. He grabbed his blaster and emergency pack. PX, initiate security protocol Omega. Lock down the bridge and scramble the navigation data. Sir, what about the passenger? Derek hesitated. She's what they're after. I'm not giving up a paid-for asset that easily. He headed toward the cargo hold. Besides, I doubt they'd let us go, even if we handed her over. When he reached the cargo hold, Derek froze in the doorway. The cage was empty, its door still securely locked from the outside. The chains lay in coiled heaps on the floor. He drew his blaster, scanning the shadows of the cargo hold. Where are you? He called out, his voice tense. Movement behind him. Derek spun around, weapon raised. The blue woman stood there, motionless and silent. She had risen to her full height, taller than he had expected, nearly a head above him. Her armor, though ancient and damaged, still cut an imposing figure. Her face remained partly obscured by her white hair, her eyes still firmly shut. Derek kept his blaster trained on her. How did you get out? She tilted her head slightly as if listening to something only she could hear. Then with deliberate slowness, she turned her face toward the outer hull of the ship, where the sounds of the approaching forces could now be heard. Yeah, we've got company, Derek acknowledged. They seem very interested in getting you back. She took a step toward him. Derek tightened his grip on the blaster. Don't, he warned. I've had enough surprises for one day. She paused, then extended her open hand, palm up. The gesture was unmistakable. an offer of alliance. Derek eyed her suspiciously. Now you want to be friends? After a week of the silent treatment? A distant explosion rocked the ship. The boarding parties were forcing their way in. Fine, Derek decided, lowering his weapon slightly. The enemy of my enemy and all that. But if you try anything... He didn't finish the threat. The blue woman had already moved past him with fluid grace, heading toward the ship's emergency exit hatch. Wait, Derek called, hurrying after her. There are at least a dozen armed men out there. She paused at the hatch controls, her head tilted in that listening pose again. Then, to Derek's amazement, she spoke for the first time, her voice deep and melodic, with an accent he couldn't place. You're not afraid of the dead? The question caught him off guard. He stared at her profile, at the closed eyes that somehow seemed to perceive everything. Only the beautiful kind, he replied, surprising himself with the honesty in his voice. A hint of something, perhaps amusement, touched her lips. Then she punched the emergency release, and the desert air rushed in as the hatch slid open. They fled into the harsh landscape, the twin moons overhead casting long shadows across the dunes. Derek led the way, knowing the terrain would offer their only advantage against superior numbers. Behind them, the sounds of the boarding party echoed from the ship, followed by angry shouts as their absence was discovered. This way, Derek hissed, ducking into a narrow canyon that cut through the rocky terrain. There's a network of caves about a kilometer in. We can lose them there. The blue woman followed silently, her movements precise despite her closed eyes. She navigated the uneven ground with uncanny awareness, never stumbling, never hesitating. They pressed deeper into the canyon as the daylight began to fade. The temperature dropped rapidly, the desert moon surrendering its heat to the void of space. By the time they reached a sheltered alcove suitable for a temporary camp, Derek's breath misted in the chill air. We should be safe here for a few hours, he said, setting down his pack. They'll have to search the canyons on foot. Their scanners won't penetrate these rock formations. He gathered some scrub vegetation and small pieces of deadwood, arranging them in a shallow pit before igniting them with a plasma torch from his pack. The fire caught quickly, casting flickering orange light on the stone walls around them. The blue woman settled on the opposite side of the fire, her posture straight and vigilant despite their exhaustion. The firelight danced across her azure skin and white hair, making the patterns on her flesh seem to move like living creatures. Derek studied her openly now, taking in details he hadn't noticed before. Her armor, though ancient, bore intricate engravings that told stories he couldn't decipher. Her face, partially visible through the curtain of her hair, had a timeless quality. Neither young nor old, but somehow both. Do you remember grabbing me? He asked suddenly. Back at the auction? She turned her face toward him, her closed eyes somehow focusing directly on him. I wasn't asleep, she replied. I heard you laugh. Derek nodded slowly. Fair enough. I probably deserved it. He rubbed his throat, where the faint bruises still lingered. You have a name? She was silent for so long he thought she had retreated back into her muteness. Finally she spoke. Once, but it died with my world. I'm sorry, Derek said, and meant it. Don't be. Worlds die. It is the way of things. Derek rummaged in his pack, pulling out a ration bar and breaking it in half. He offered a piece across the fire. Hungry? You haven't eaten in at least a week. She made no move to take it. I do not require sustenance as you do. Of course not, Derek muttered. That would be too normal. He ate both halves himself, washing it down with water from his canteen. As the night deepened, the canyon filled with strange sounds, the wind moaning through stone corridors, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. Derek added more fuel to the fire, fighting against the increasing cold. You're injured, the blue woman said suddenly. Derek glanced down at his side, where a tear in his jacket revealed a gash he'd received during their hasty escape. Blood had dried in a dark streak along his ribs. It's nothing, he dismissed. Had worse shaving. She rose in one fluid motion and circled the fire, kneeling beside him. Before he could protest, her hands were examining the wound with gentle precision, her eyes still firmly shut. Superficial, she agreed, but already beginning to fester. From a compartment in her armor, she produced a small container. Opening it revealed a pale, luminescent salve. She applied it to his wound with practiced efficiency. What is that? Derek asked, wincing at the initial sting. A remedy my people used in battle. It will prevent corruption and accelerate healing. The The sting faded quickly, replaced by a pleasant numbness. Derek relaxed slightly. "Thank you." She nodded once, returning to her place across the fire. Derek shrugged out of his jacket, grimacing at the tear and bloodstain. "Shame. I've had this jacket since my first big score." He held it up, examining the damage in the firelight. "Sentimental value, I guess." After a moment's hesitation, he offered it across the fire. "Here, you might need it more than I do. Gets cold out here at night." She tilted her head, considering the offer. Then, to his surprise, she accepted the jacket, draping it carefully across her shoulders. "I don't feel cold," she said, "but I accept." Derek smiled faintly. "Progress. We've moved from throttling to gift exchange in just a week." They sat in companionable silence as the fire burned low. Derek found himself fighting to stay awake, the day's exertions taking their toll. "You should rest," the blue woman said. "I will maintain watch." "With your eyes closed?" Derek couldn't help asking. A hint of that almost smile touched her lips again. "I see more with my eyes closed than most do with theirs open." Derek wanted to question her further, but exhaustion won out. He arranged his pack as a makeshift pillow and stretched out near the fire. "Wake me if our friends come calling," he murmured, already drifting toward sleep. Just before consciousness slipped away, he thought he heard her reply, "Sleep well, Derek the Fox." He awakened to her hand on his shoulder, her touch light but urgent. "They come," she said simply. Derek was instantly alert, reaching for his blaster as he sat up. The fire had burned down to embers, and the canyon was filled with the gray light of dawn. "How many?" he whispered. "8, armed, moving cautiously through the canyon floor." Derek peered around the edge of their alcove but saw nothing. "How do you know?" "I hear their breathing, the weight of their steps on stone." He didn't question her further. They gathered their few belongings quickly, extinguishing the last of the fire. "There's a fork in the canyon about 100 meters ahead," Derek said, checking his blaster's charge. "We could double back, try to reach the ship." The blue woman shook her head. "They've left guards. The ship is not an option. Then we keep moving deeper into the canyons. There's a settlement about 20 kilometers from here, if we can reach it." "No," she interrupted. "We face them here." Derek stared at her incredulously. "Are you insane? There are 8 of them, heavily armed. We have 1 blaster between us." She turned to him, her posture radiating confidence despite the odds. "I have fought worse with less. You haven't even seen how many there are." "I hear your breathing," she replied calmly. "That's enough." Before Derek could argue further, she had stepped out from their shelter, moving with purpose toward the approaching hunters. Left with little choice, he swore under his breath and followed, keeping to the shadows along the canyon wall. The confrontation came quickly. The hunting party rounded a bend in the canyon and stopped short at the sight of the blue woman standing openly in their path. 8 figures in matching gray armor, their faces hidden behind reflective visors, weapons raised in perfect synchronization. "Target acquired," one of them announced into a comm unit. "Proceeding with retrieval." "Stand down and surrender," another called out. "You are the property of the Reclamation Corps. Resistance will result in termination." The blue woman stood motionless, head tilted slightly as if listening to their positions. Her eyes remained closed, her face serene. "I belong to no one," she stated, her voice carrying clearly in the canyon. "Final warning," the leader barked. "Stand down or—" She moved. One moment she was standing still. The next she was among them, a blur of blue skin and ancient armor. The first soldier fell before he could complete his sentence. His neck snapped with terrible precision. The second managed to fire a single wild shot before her fist crushed his visor and the face behind it. Derek watched in stunned amazement, then shook himself into action. He emerged from cover, blaster firing, providing supporting fire as the blue woman tore through the hunting party with terrifying efficiency. She fought with her eyes shut, yet moved with perfect awareness of her surroundings. Every strike found its target. Every movement flowed into the next with liquid grace. It wasn't combat so much as deadly choreography, beautiful and horrifying in equal measure. A stray blast struck the canyon wall near Derek's head, showering him with stone fragments. He ducked and rolled, coming up to fire 3 rapid shots that dropped another soldier. "On your left," he shouted as one of the hunters circled behind her. She reacted instantly, spinning to catch the attacker's weapon arm and using his momentum to hurl him into the canyon wall with bone-crushing force. The remaining soldiers attempted to regroup, forming a defensive perimeter and concentrating their fire. The blue woman weaved through the barrage with impossible speed, but even she couldn't evade every shot. A blast caught her in the shoulder, spinning her around. Another grazed her leg. Derek provided covering fire, forcing the soldiers to divide their attention. He hit one in the knee, dropping him, then had to dive for cover as return fire peppered his position. When he looked up again, the blue woman was surrounded, 3 soldiers closing in with specialized restraints. She swayed slightly, her injuries taking their toll. Without thinking, Derek broke from cover, firing wildly as he charged the group. His sudden attack created the distraction she needed. As the soldiers turned toward this new threat, she exploded into motion again, breaking through their circle. The battle was brief and brutal after that. Working together, Derek providing range support while she engaged in close combat, they systematically eliminated the remaining hunters. When the last one fell, the canyon returned to eerie silence, broken only by their labored breathing. Derek surveyed the carnage, the blaster heavy in his hand. That was impressive. The blue woman stood amid the fallen soldiers, blood, some hers, some theirs, staining her armor. She turned toward his voice, and for the first time, he saw vulnerability in her posture. She took one step toward him, then stumbled, her injuries finally asserting themselves. Derek rushed forward, catching her before she fell. She was heavier than she looked, dense with muscle beneath the armor. "Easy," he said. "Let's get you somewhere safe." He helped her back to their alcove, where he gently eased her down against the stone wall. In the morning light, he could see the extent of her injuries, a deep burn on her shoulder, another along her thigh, and various lesser wounds. "Those look bad," he commented, retrieving his emergency medical kit from his pack. "I have endured worse," she replied, her voice steady despite her condition. Derek cleaned the wounds as best he could, applying antiseptic and synth-skin patches from his kit. She remained stoic throughout, never flinching, her breathing controlled and even. "You fight well," she said as he worked. "For one who relies on his eyes." Derek snorted. "I get by, though I'm more of a runner than a fighter usually." "Yet you did not run today." He paused, realizing the truth of her observation. I guess I didn't." When he had done all he could for her injuries, Derek sat back on his heels, studying her face. Even wounded, even with her eyes closed, she projected an aura of contained power that both intimidated and fascinated him. "Why did you help me?" he asked suddenly. "Back there. You could have left me, made your escape while they were distracted." She was silent for a long moment. "You spoke to me," she finally said. "On your ship. You shared your stories, your regrets. You were listening." Derek was genuinely surprised. "I thought you were, I don't know, in some kind of trance." "I am always listening. It is how I see." Derek sat beside her, leaning against the cool stone wall. "Those people, the Reclamation Corps, they really want you back. They believe I am valuable, a relic of a forgotten age." "Are you?" She turned her face toward him. "What do you think?" Derek considered the question seriously. "I think you're dangerous. I think you're probably the most lethal being I've ever met." He paused. "But I also think you're more than just a weapon." Something in her posture softened almost imperceptibly. "You said you wanted to die," Derek continued quietly. "That first day at the auction, the auctioneer said you'd been completely unresponsive since they found you. Why are you still fighting?" "Because," she said slowly, "for once, someone looks at me like I matter. Not as a weapon, not as a relic, but as a being worthy of speech." The simple honesty of her answer caught Derek off guard. He found himself without a quick retort or deflection. "I still haven't opened my eyes," she added after a moment. Derek nodded. "But you trust me. I hear it in your voice." She didn't deny it. They remained in the alcove through the day, recovering their strength. Derek took inventory of their supplies, limited food, half a canteen of water, and his blaster with 30% charge remaining. Not ideal for crossing 20 kilometers of canyon terrain, but they had little choice. As dusk approached, they prepared to move out. The blue woman's wounds had already begun to heal at an accelerated rate, further evidence of her non-human physiology. "We should travel by night," Derek suggested. "Cooler, and will be harder to spot if they send another hunting party." She nodded agreement, accepting his help to rise. Though still injured, she moved with determination, showing no sign of pain. They traveled in companionable silence through the labyrinthine canyons, guided by Derek's navigation device and the Blue Woman's uncanny awareness of their surroundings. Several times she warned him of unstable terrain or dangerous wildlife before he could detect them himself. By midnight, they had covered nearly half the distance to the settlement. They paused to rest in a shallow cave, sharing the last of the water. "How do you do it?" Derek asked as they sat side by side in the darkness. "Fight like that with your eyes closed?" She considered the question. "My people perceive the world differently than yours. We sense presence, intention, movement, all without sight as you understand it. So it's a cultural thing? You could open them if you wanted?" "It is more than that," she said carefully. "My eyes, they are not merely for seeing. They are conduits of power. In my culture, we open them only for two purposes: to bond with another soul or to destroy an enemy." Derek frowned, skeptical. "You sound like something from an old space opera. Maybe you just don't want to look me in the eye." Her posture stiffened slightly, the first sign of offense he'd seen from her. Without warning, she reached out and placed her palm against his temple. A jolt of energy coursed through him, and for a fleeting second, he saw something. Vast cities of crystalline structures under three moons. Beings of blue skin moving in perfect harmony. Then warfare, devastation, a power that consumed everything it touched. She withdrew her hand, and the vision vanished. "What the hell was that?" he gasped, heart racing. "A fragment of memory, of truth." Her voice was soft but unyielding. "Do you still think I speak of fairy tales?" Derek stared at her, shaken. "These people chasing us. They don't know about your eyes, do they?" "Number. They believe I am simply a preserved specimen of a dead race, a curiosity, a trophy." There was bitterness in her voice now. "They do not understand what they hunt." "And what exactly are they hunting?" Derek asked softly. She turned to face him directly, her closed eyes somehow meeting his gaze. "The last guardian of a power that destroyed my civilization, a power I was charged to contain until death released me from my duty." Derek felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. "And is it contained?" "For now, but there are forces that seek to unleash it, to weaponize what they do not understand." She touched the patterns on her skin. "These are not decorations. They are seals, bindings written in flesh and spirit." Derek stared at the intricate markings with new understanding. "And that's why you let yourself be captured? Why you were just waiting?" "I was waiting for death," she admitted. "For an end to my vigil. I am the last of my kind. For millennia I have wandered, ensuring the power remains dormant. I am tired." The raw honesty in her voice stirred something in Derek's chest. "But you're still fighting." "Yes," she agreed softly. "I am still fighting." They resumed their journey before dawn, pushing through exhaustion. As the first light broke over the canyon walls, they spotted their destination. A communications relay station perched on the canyon rim, its dishes pointed skyward. "Not quite a settlement," Derek explained, "but there should be an emergency transmitter. We can call for extraction." They climbed the steep path to the station, alert for any sign of pursuit. The facility appeared abandoned, its exterior weathered by years of exposure to the harsh environment. Derek bypassed the security lock with practiced ease, and they slipped inside. The interior was sparse, a few workstations, basic living quarters, and the communications array. "Give me a few minutes," Derek said, settling at the main console. "I need to power up the systems and send a secure transmission." The Blue Woman took up position near the entrance, her posture alert despite their exhaustion and her injuries. "Who will answer your call?" she asked. "An old associate, someone who owes me a favor." Derek's fingers flew across the console. "They're discreet, no questions asked. Can have a ship here within 6 hours." She nodded once, then said quietly, "You should go." "I'll stay." Derek's hand stilled on the console. "What?" "The Reclamation Corps will not stop hunting me. They believe I am too valuable." She hesitated, then added in a colder voice, "I could shut down your neural pathways. Make it painless. You would never know they were coming for you." Derek stared at her, stunned. "You'd kill me? After everything?" Not kill, spare. Her voice softened. Or I could erase your memory of our time together. Give you back the life you had before. The choice is yours. Derek stood slowly, approaching her with measured steps. Is that what you think I want? To forget? To run? It would be safer. I don't leave people behind anymore, especially not friends. The word hung between them, simple yet profound. She tilted her head as if examining it from different angles. Is that what we are? Friends? I don't know what we are, Derek admitted, but I know I'm not abandoning you to those mercenaries. She moved toward him then, her steps deliberate. When she stood before him, she raised her hand and gently touched his face, fingers tracing the line of his scar with surprising tenderness. If I open my eyes, she said softly, you'll see something that destroys, something that binds. Are you prepared for that consequence? Derek covered her hand with his own. Show me, he said simply. I won't run. The moment hung suspended between them, fragile and charged with possibility. Then alarms blared throughout the station, shattering the silence. Proximity alert, Derek said grimly, checking the security feeds. They found us. Multiple ships inbound. The blue woman withdrew her hand. How many? Too many. 3 assault craft. At least 30 soldiers. Derek's mind raced through options, each more desperate than the last. The transmission sent, but extraction is hours away. We need to hold this position. She nodded once, decision made. I will meet them outside. That's suicide. There are too many. Perhaps, she agreed calmly. But it is time to end this chase. Derek grabbed her arm. I'm coming with you. No, her voice was firm. You have seen me fight. You have not seen me unleash. Before he could argue further, she turned and strode toward the exit. At the door, she paused and glanced back over her shoulder. If I do not return, know this. You gave me purpose when I had none. For that, I thank you. Then she was gone, stepping out into the harsh light of the desert moon. Derek stood frozen for a moment, then swore violently and rushed to the security monitors. The external cameras showed the blue woman standing alone on the open ground before the station. In the distance, the assault craft were touching down, disgorging armored soldiers who formed up in attack formation. A voice boomed across the open space, amplified by external speakers. This is Commander Vex of the Reclamation Corps Special Recovery Division. Surrender the artifact immediately or face termination. The blue woman stood motionless, head tilted in her characteristic listening pose. The commander's patience quickly evaporated. Take her, he ordered. Non-lethal measures only. The specimen must be recovered intact. The soldiers advanced in coordinated groups, weapons ready. The blue woman remained still, waiting until they were within striking distance. Then as before, she moved. But this time was different. Where before her combat had been precise and efficient, now it was unleashed fury. She tore through the first wave of soldiers with terrifying speed. Bodies flying through the air as if struck by an invisible force. A soldier's helmet shattered under her fist, the visor imploding inward. Another spine bent backward at an impossible angle as she swept past. She moved like a storm through their ranks, a blur of blue skin and ancient armor. More soldiers poured from the assault craft, and still she fought. But even from the grainy security feed, Derek could see she was tiring. A blast caught her side, staggering her momentarily. Another struck her leg. Still she fought on. Enough of this, the commander's voice ordered. Switch to lethal protocols. The specimen is too dangerous. The remaining soldiers adjusted their weapons, and the next volley of fire carried deadly intent. You don't understand what you're dealing with, the commander shouted to his troops. If she opens her eyes, we all die. Target the head. The blue woman evaded most shots, but not all. A blast struck her squarely in the chest, driving her to her knees. Derek couldn't watch anymore. He grabbed his blaster and raced for the exit, knowing he was likely rushing to his death, but unable to stand by while she fought alone. He burst outside just as the commander himself approached the kneeling blue woman, weapon drawn. A pity, the commander said. Such a specimen deserved better study, but the risk is too great. He raised his weapon to her head. Derek's blaster shot struck the commander's arm, sending the weapon spinning away. All eyes turned to him as he stood in the station doorway. Blaster raised. Get away from her, he growled. The commander recovered quickly, gesturing to his remaining soldiers. Kill him, then finish the specimen. The blue woman rose slowly to her feet, her armor scorched and broken in places, blue blood seeping from multiple wounds. Yet somehow she radiated more power than ever before. Enough, she said, her voice carrying across the battlefield with unnatural resonance. This ends now. She raised her hands to her face, and for the first time since Derek had met her, she opened her eyes. Light erupted from them, not the soft glow he had half expected, but blinding radiance that seemed to bend the very fabric of reality around her. The soldiers closest to her screamed, their weapons dropping from nerveless fingers as they clutched at their heads. The commander staggered backward, his face a mask of terror. "What are you?" he gasped. The blue woman advanced on him, her eyes blazing with power that was neither technology nor natural biology, but something far more ancient and terrible. "I am the last guardian," she said, her voice layered with harmonics that made Derek's teeth ache. "The keeper of that which destroyed worlds. The binding that holds chaos at bay." The commander fell to his knees, blood trickling from his nose and ears. Around him, his soldiers were in similar states of collapse, overwhelmed by whatever power emanated from her gaze. "Mercy," the commander pleaded. "You hunted me," she replied implacably. "You would have weaponized what you cannot comprehend. There is no mercy for such ambition." She placed her hand on his forehead, and the commander convulsed once before collapsing, his eyes wide and vacant. One by one, she moved among the fallen soldiers, touching each in turn. None rose again. Derek watched in stunned silence as she methodically neutralized every member of the attack force. When the last had fallen, she turned toward him, her eyes still blazing with that otherworldly light. Fear gripped him as she approached. He had seen what her gaze had done to hardened soldiers. What would it do to him? She stopped before him, her face streaked with blue blood, her armor hanging in tatters. The light in her eyes dimmed slightly, focusing on him with terrible intensity. "You did not run," she observed, her voice still carrying those strange harmonics. Derek swallowed hard, suddenly certain she was about to exact the same punishment on him. After all, hadn't he bought her, caged her, treated her as property just as they had? "I told you I wouldn't," he managed to say, standing his ground despite his fear. To his surprise, she knelt before him, her head bowed. The gesture was one of supplication, of surrender, the last thing he had expected after witnessing her power. "Now I am yours," and she said softly. "Just don't forget who you're playing with." The light in her eyes faded to a subtle glow, still inhuman, but no longer reality warping in its intensity. Derek realized he was trembling. Whether from fear or awe or some combination of both, he couldn't tell. "I don't want to own you," he managed to say. "I never did." She looked up at him, her luminous eyes searching his face. "Then what do you want, Derek the Fox?" He considered the question seriously. What did he want? A week ago, his answer would have been simple. The next score, the next payday, the next adventure. Now looking at this ancient, powerful being who had chosen to spare him when she could have destroyed him with a glance, he found his priorities shifting. "A partner," he said finally. "Someone to watch my back. Someone to trust." He paused, then added with a small smile, "Someone to keep me honest." The blue woman rose to her feet, standing eye to eye with him. The patterns on her skin seemed to pulse with subtle light, responding to some internal rhythm. "I have been many things," she said. "Warrior, guardian, prisoner, never a partner." "First time for everything," Derek replied. A faint smile touched her lips. "Indeed." In the distance, the whine of approaching engines announced the arrival of Derek's contact, right on schedule. 6 hours had passed, though it felt like moments. "Our ride's here," he said. "What do you say? Ready for a new adventure?" She studied him for a long moment, her luminous eyes seeing far more than his physical form. He was certain. Then she nodded once. Decision made. "Lead the way, partner." As they walked toward the landing ship, Derek felt the weight of her gaze on him, no longer hidden behind closed lids, but open and honest in its inhuman power. He had bargained for a weapon and found a companion, had sought a trophy and discovered a legend. The universe, he reflected, had a strange sense of humor, and for once the joke wasn't at his expense. He glanced at the blue warrior walking beside him, her steps now perfectly matched to his own. "You know," he said conversationally, "you still haven't told me what to call you." She considered this as they walked. My true name would shatter your mind, she said matter-of-factly. But in your tongue, you may call me Echo. Echo, Derek repeated, testing the name. It suited her, a resonance of something ancient, a power that reflected back what was directed at it. I like it. As they reached the landing ship, Echo paused and turned to face the battlefield one last time, her luminous eyes sweeping over the fallen soldiers. They will send others, she warned, more powerful, better prepared. Derek grinned, the old familiar rush of danger singing in his veins. Let them come. We'll be ready. Echo's answering smile held the promise of both protection and peril. Yes, she agreed. We will. Together they boarded the ship, leaving the desert moon and its grim aftermath behind. As the craft broke atmosphere, Derek found himself watching Echo's face as she gazed out at the stars. Ancient eyes seeing patterns and histories he could never comprehend. He had mocked a sleeping warrior and found himself bound to a living legend. The universe, it seemed, hadn't finished with Derek the Fox just yet, and for the first time in years, he was perfectly fine with that.